Welcome back, folks, to Free My Pain Now with Dr. Matt Doduro. It's episode 28. Very excited that you guys have kept me on this long. I appreciate it, Samuel. Today, I have a legend and a mentor to me, Dr. Frank Shallenberger, who is really the father of ozone therapy here in the United States. And as I showed you earlier, Frank, I carry this book around with me when I travel. I'm constantly I've read it probably 3 or 4 times. I've read and taken notes all over it. So I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're on vacation in Cancun right now, so thank you so much.
Glad to be here with you, Matt.
So a couple things. I mean, Doc, you found this technology. Your dad was a medical doctor. You were helping him clean out some stuff. You found some of these old books 30, 35 years ago, correct? And it really, I mean, you're a medical doctor by trade. And I think, tell us how you came around to really embracing this therapy.
Well, it didn't take me too long. Initially, after graduating in 1973, I went to emergency medicine, and I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And after a while, decided to transition into private practice. It took me about 6 months to figure out that to see a lot of the limitations of conventional medicine as it's practiced here in the U.S. And one of the limitations is, we don't treat causes as a rule, and then the other limitation is what we do treat with is drugs. And drugs have lots of side effects. And after a while, it occurred to me, maybe there's a better way. And kind of what you were talking about is I'm looking through some of my dad's old books, which are from the 20s and 30s. And it was a real eye-opener because I didn't realize it, but back then they were into diets and vitamins and minerals and organic molecules. And that was, pre-FDA for the most part. And and that just turned me around. It said, let's start looking at causes. Let's see what we can do to actually fix the disease instead of just covering it up with drugs that end up giving me more side effects and more problems anyway.
Getting to the root cause. You run one of the largest anti-aging clinics in the country. You're out in Carson City, Nevada. I was lucky enough to visit your facility. I don't even know how old you are. I mean, you look great. I think you're 72 now, 71?
I'm 73 now.
All right. Looking good. One of the things you said that, and I quote a lot from your book because I like it. I think you brought this technology to the States in a lot of ways, and you brought it, I won't say mainstream, but it's getting there and it's reaching that tipping point. But you came across a lot of obstacles along the way, and medical doctors and other peers probably that didn't really understand this technology. And I think there's a couple different ways to do ozone therapy. One that can be a little less advantageous. Can you tell what's different about your therapy and how you train these hundreds and thousands of doctors around the clinic, around the world?
Well, basically ozone's a signaling molecule. It's a gas. And the human body makes gases. It's interesting, huh? But our immune system, when it's under attack, and we're fighting off bacteria or viruses or whatever, our immune cells secrete ozone as a gas to stimulate the way the antibodies work. That was first discovered at Scripps almost 15, 20 years ago. Before then, we really didn't know that it did that. But we realized it did something because chronic infections respond very quickly to ozone therapy. Another signaling gas that listeners will probably know about is nitric oxide. There's a number of these signaling gases in the human body, and what they do is pretty remarkable. They send out signals to all kinds of different systems. And we're talking immune systems, nervous systems, endocrine systems, detoxification systems, just about anything that goes on in the human body basically is going to be signaled by ozone. And so we can use that. We can harness that. You just make ozone, you make it, it's basically, for the listeners who don't know, ozone is 3 oxygen atoms as opposed to regular oxygen, which is 2 oxygen atoms. And it's that third oxygen atom that gives the signal. If I were to just treat a patient with 2 oxygen atoms or O2, nothing much is going to happen. It's good and it's nice, but it doesn't do any signaling. I put O3, so I'm going to take O2, or I'm going to go buy that in a tank, run it through a generator, and in that we'll generate O3, and then we can do lots of things with that O3.
What I love most about reading some of your books is that you went around and you talked to specialists in pain management. You'd always ask them, where does pain come from? Right?
Yeah.
And no, everybody gave a different answer, but you would say, well, I don't know where it comes from, but I know when I put ozone in it, the pain goes away.
Yeah. So, I'm not a scientist. I'm a doctor. And, I like to know how things work, but that's not my job. My job is just to find things that do work. And this is one of them.
You also talk about, I was lucky enough to not only get to visit your clinic, but also bring the TRT, the tissue regeneration technology, and get to use it on you, Miss Judy, I think one of your nurses, Matt Nelson. And, you said something to me. You've had some chronic back issues, and you went down the hallway and back, and I have you on video, and you said, wow, I'm about 75, 80% better after, not that it lasts forever, but after that one treatment. And I saw and you were like, how does this work? Why don't I know more about this? And it's the same thing with ozone therapy. Why are cost-effective, efficient therapies, why are they bottom shelved here in our industry? Why in this healthcare system?
It's a stacked deck, basically. We have a system here that works really well for the powers that be. Doesn't work really well for the end user necessarily, but for the people that are making money, I'm basically talking big medicine, big pharma, that whole group, big hospital, the whole big thing, all of that stuff. I mean, that's a system that's generating everybody that runs that system a lot of profits. And here's going to come along something like ozone therapy, which is going to chip into those profits. And just nobody's going to be interested in that. That's just the way it is.
Like you say, it's unpatented, right? And
it's unpatented. You can't do. You can't really make any money off it. It's just a service provider sort of thing, Matt. It doesn't cost anything to make ozone.
Right.
So it's just important to people who want to help their patients. That's all. It's not a big money maker in that way.
I was surprised, and correct me on my numbers, but did you say that 70% of your patients have Lyme's disease, or is there a huge number that are coming to work with you because of that? Can you explain why?
Yeah, I don't want to say that necessarily, but I do get I get a lot of Lyme disease patients. My practice is basically, one of those practices where, it's a last resort type of practice. So pretty much most of the people I get, if they're a Lyme patient or a cancer or whatever it is, they will have seen lots of other people perhaps, and, just not gotten the results. And I end up with them. So the point is that I, as a rule, end up with the harder cases.
You go a doctor after doctor after doctor. My listeners know my story. I had H. pylori undetected for 9 months. That almost killed me. And I think that people find you as, like you say, the last beach, the last area to go to. And so tell us, we've got a couple minutes here before our second segment. You've been teaching doctors and clinicians for the last 20 years.
Since 1991. It's been a long time.
Wow. And it's the American Academy of Ozone Therapy.
That's right.
And you have a few different times a year, you'll actually teach the clinicians how to use this technology. And then I think you have one at the end of February, beginning of March, that's going to be in Reno, correct?
That's right. So 3 times a year in Reno, we teach doctors, naturopaths, dentists, veterinarians. We've got all these courses to teach all these practitioners how to use this gas to help their patients.
That's awesome. And then you'll have your national event that'll be, I believe, May 15th, 16th that weekend. It's Broomfield, Colorado.
Yeah, it's May 14 to 15,
Okay.
and this coming May, and in Denver, the Denver area,
Yeah.
flying to Denver, basically.
That's
It's
right.
going to be a great conference. We've got all kinds of really interesting things going on with this,
Well,
and so
yeah,
that's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm excited because I do think that ozone therapy helps complement our TRT type of treatments, and we've got a few of your doctors out there that are implementing both, and I'm really excited to see. I think it kind of complements both of the technologies so well. Phil Lanou is one of them. He's out in Spokane, Washington, and every week I talk to him. He's doing some wonderful work.
Well, I like the way you use that term compliments, because probably that's the single best message I like to tell practitioners is that whatever you're doing, whatever your method of treatment is, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you could be a drug pusher, you could be a homeopathic, you could be an acupuncturist, you could be a cardiologist. It doesn't matter what you do. If you add this into what you do, it's going to be a lot better and you're going to like it.
All right, so in our next segment, we'll chat a little bit more about oxidative stresses and oxygen utilization. Thanks. Welcome back, folks, to Free My Pain Now with Dr. Matt Doduro. And via satellite, today is Dr. Frank Shallenberger, MD. You're president of American Academy of Ozone Therapy. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
So wonderful. We talked about some of your upcoming conferences. I love the way you talk about how every birthday, our mitochondria will get a little weaker. And for some of our listeners out there, they might remember from 10th grade, the mitochondria are the powerhouse to our cells, right? They create ATP and they create energy for our body to replicate and regenerate and repair itself. What is the true sign of aging, Doc? How can you talk to us about that?
Well, I think people know that as you get older, you get weaker, you get more frail. Eventually, you become more susceptible to diseases, and that's what we call aging. That entire sequence of events that happens, even though it is associated with getting older, the reason behind it is really quite simple. It has to do with what you just said, the mitochondria. And the fact is that the mitochondrial function in our cells declines with each birthday. Now, that's the bad news. Eventually, it declines so much you die, and essentially. But before it starts declining and you die, there's this bad period of time in there where you're not quite alive and you're not quite dead. And that's where we want to avoid that. We don't want to do that. So the way you can get around this is to resuscitate these mitochondria, make them perform at a younger level, and that will dramatically slow down this period of deterioration that we just call aging.
Well, that's awesome. And at your clinic, you have specific ways of testing how efficient we are at utilizing oxygen.
That's exactly right, because that's what mitochondria do. All that oxygen we breathe in, it only does one thing, right? It gets processed by the mitochondria, that produces energy, that keeps us alive. And in a sense, we're just like clock radios. We need the juice. We need the energy to keep working well. If you start turning down the juice to a clock radio, it's not going to work very well. And that's what happens to us.
I tell my listeners, you can go 30 days without food. You can go 3 days without water. You go 3 minutes without oxygen, but you can't go a second without electrical impulse going through your body, right? How do we really look at it? When we're hooked up in a hospital, they've got the little EKG, beep, beep, beep. That's when there's no sign of electrical activity. So you're one of the original biohackers out there. I mean, when people look you up, that's really what you've done. And I mean, you've utilized it on yourself and your family, I'm sure, first. I hear some wonderful stories. How do our patients reach you? How do our patients or a practitioner that does the similar type of work that you?
But let me give you a couple of websites that they can go to learn more about these things.
Hmm.
Is in terms of my clinic and what we do at our clinic, which is, Matt, is a broad-based clinic. But in terms of that, they can go to my website, which is really easy to remember. It's antiagingmedicine.com, antiagingmedicine.com. And then to learn more about how ozone can participate in that and can also do other things, they can go to the Academy website, which is AAOT, American Academy of Ozone Therapy, AAOT.us. And
Hmm.
there's lots of information there. And as you pointed out too, they could go to Amazon, Google my name, and I've got several books, well, a bunch of books that I've written, but several of them are on just exactly ozone therapy. You can learn a lot just by looking at these things.
That's excellent. And I started watching you more on some YouTube, some great interviews you did. I really enjoyed those. You know, we talked a little bit about big pharma. One of the things I was really shocked about, because my whole life I thought, wow, we have the strictest guidelines for the FDA, and they're so hard to do, these research and double-blind studies. For every dollar spent on research, pharmaceutical companies now spend $19 on marketing to tell you, you know what I mean? So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy how we've allowed that. And there's only two countries in the world that allow this type of marketing. It's New Zealand and the United States, both of which have the highest healthcare costs in the world. I mean, we're suffering,
Right.
right? We're suffering from the worst opioid epidemic in our country's history. What are some things? I mean, you've been in healthcare for now over 30 years. What would you say? What would you, if President Trump is listening, which he may be signing into this, who knows? He likes my
Oh,
show.
that'd be great. That'd be great. People have to understand, do not rely on our medical system. Just don't do it. Take control of your life. Be responsible. Don't, get sick someday and say, oh, I don't know how I got sick. I have no idea. Don't do that. There are certain things that we can do that can keep. I have patients in their 80s, even late 80s, that are riding bicycles up mountain passes. I mean, there's just, and this doesn't happen accidentally. You're not going to achieve that accidentally. You got to go out and take the reins, take control, do your due diligence, just like you would anything else. And people just need to realize that it's possible. If they realize it was possible, more people probably do it. I think a lot of people out there say, getting sick, getting frail, getting feeble, getting fat, all that stuff is just, it's bound to happen to me. So, there's nothing I can get away with. No way I can avoid that, which is that's just not true. We can totally avoid these things and have a much better quality of life while we're at it.
You touched on the reason why I started the show is I wanted our listeners and our patients to really become their own healthcare advocates. They have to become their own experts in their condition and build a team of wonderful doctors. And they're not all going to be in your backyard. You've got to find them like we found you, and it's well worth it. So, I think that's really good words to live by, and obviously you're proof. You're living proof of it. You look great, and you're active still, and work hard. I couldn't even chase you around that day when I was in your office.
I was just reading one of Hippocrates' books yesterday while I was sitting on the beach,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting. We're talking about 500 years before Christ, and Hippocrates is saying, if your doctor is in bad shape, go see another doctor. I'm not kidding you.
He said
It's in his writings. He's chastising his doctors. Stay in good shape because we don't want your patients to be seeing you looking so crummy.
Well, Doc, it's one of my missions in life to highlight wonderful doctors that are out there in this country doing groundbreaking work. And I remember 3 years ago when I first came across tissue regeneration technology, and I flew all the way out to Seattle, Washington to meet with these very influential doctors, and they looked at it and they said, "Young man, you're swimming upstream. This is you're not going to be. This is not going to be easy." And I've really looked at the way you and the longevity resources have how you guys have partnered and really built a platform for educating doctors and the patients out there for other options. How has that worked? We've got 2.5 minutes. How has that worked? Those guys have been really good for you, right? They're the ones that make the ozone generators.
Yeah, Longevity Resources is, it's a company based out of Vancouver, Canada, and they make pretty much all the supplies. They produce all the supplies that practitioners need to use in the various applications of ozone for their patients. And I've known these guys for a long time, and so it was a kind of a natural combination.
It's,
They have all the stuff that we need to do the job. I have the information on how to do the job, so it's just a natural marriage there.
I'm excited that there's veterinarians that are using this technology, the biological dentists. I mean, I think that's huge. As I'm learning more about mercury and chronic infections, I think that every family should have a biological dentist they could work with as well.
Absolutely. I live 3.5 hours from a biological dentist, and I don't have one close to me, unfortunately, at least not yet. But there's no way that I'm just gonna, save time by going to my local guy if I have any kind of significant process other than like cleaning, inspection, X-rays or that kind of thing. If there's something important needs to go on, like an implant or tooth extraction or an infection or anything like that, there's no way I'm going to see a dentist that doesn't know how to do ozone. That just doesn't make sense to me.
That's great. That's awesome. And we're realizing that mercury can be the root source of a lot of these chronic infections and inflammation. So, I mean, I want patients to go out and do their research on that. And there's definitely a specific way to have that removed. Doc, in closing, we got about 40 seconds. Again, thank you for taking a chance on us and also working with us and taking time out of your busy vacation with your family. And please thank your family for us. Any closing thoughts?
Yes, closing thoughts. I hope all the listeners go and investigate this. Ozone's incredibly good at so many things: immune system stimulation, fighting chronic infections that otherwise are not, you can't beat them until you add ozone in a lot of them. It's unbelievable for pain. It stimulates the detoxification system. So if people are toxic, it improves your mitochondrial function. Now, somebody listening to me probably says, oh, the guy's a snake oil salesman. And I admit it's a little hard to believe, but I hope they will do their due diligence and do a little investigating. And if nothing else, buy my book, The Principle and Applications of Ozone Therapy. Take a look at it, read it. I put a lot of science in there. There's a lot of science about this stuff. This is just not some, latest fad.
It's unfortunate that most of the research has been done in Europe. Dr. Shallenberger, thank you again. It was really a pleasure. You have a good evening.
Thanks. Have a great one.